In this second presentation for Chapter 9, we're going to continue talking about intercultural relationships, and we're going to start by comparing Eastern and Western relationship practices. So there are a couple of things here that are important in terms of differences. One is something called particularism. What's meant by that is that in Asian cultures that there's the sense that for each relationship there is a particular set of guidelines that will apply. So this is an indication of the fact that we're dealing with collectivistic cultures with a established hierarchy that's universally recognized, which translates into treating people differently, versus a individualistic culture where, as in the United States, the goal, the ideal, is to treat everybody the same way, so this universalistic orientation. Another distinction is between long-term reciprocity in Eastern relationships, and that differs from the fact that in the West, first of all, relationships tend to be more short-term. But what's meant by reciprocity here is, what do I get out of the relationship? What do I put in and what do I get out? In Asia, in general, one doesn't assume that one is going to profit from a relationship, from a friendship, for example. Whereas in the West, we assume that as an individual, I'm going to get something out of a relationship that I put effort and time into. This might even, in the West, go so far as to have a contractual side to it. So, for example, in marriage contracts, we have prenups that spell out contractually what the relationship is, what the reciprocity is going to be if that marriage dissolves. Also, in Asian cultures, there tends to be a gulf between in-group and out-group members that's much looser in the West. So, for example, in the United States, there are a lot of self-help groups that you join for a short period of time. It's not a lifelong commitment by any means. One of the other differences is the sense in Asia, in Eastern cultures, of a blending of personal and public relationships. That is to say that in business relationships, for example, it's important to establish a personal bond, a personal sense of trust with people with whom you're going to be doing business. This is different than one would find in the West. This is a topic they're going to be coming back to later on. We'll talk about business practices in different cultures. And finally, use of intermediaries is something that you don't see in Western cultures very much, but certainly you do see for a variety of reasons, in a variety of purposes in Asian cultures. And we're going to look at an example of that in China in terms of intermediaries that are used to find marriage partners.
I just landed in an interview. I'm being interviewed because there are these kind of notices here. I don't know if you can see that. But this apparently is where all the parents try to find husbands and wives for their children. It's actually a big market. I've just got accosted by a few people who realise I'm visiting here. I think I'm in their target market. But this is far too scary for me. I swear these here are all parents negotiating for husbands. See the picture? Husbands and wives. It's like a big congregation. Wow, this is crazy. So, people advertising their children. But you got to see this tunnel here. If you look at this tunnel here, this place is filled with, it's just filled. It's a bit dark here, so you might not be able to see, but this whole tunnel here, all the way to the end, is filled with notices. And then, you've got these matchmakers here, who presumably help do the brokering. They really are, oh my goodness me. There's another one here, these are the mums. There's another tunnel here, full of notices. Let's go have a look at some of them. Well, I can't read this, but it's all about age, height, weight, how much they earn. I guess those are all the important things you look for. Oh, you've got brokers here. Alright, I'll stop there for now. Fascinating, huh?
This seems very strange from an American perspective, this kind of marriage market that we saw there in the People's Park in Shanghai. Why is that taking place? Why is that needed? Well, there's a phenomenon in modern China of so-called shangnu, which translates as literally leftover women. Kind of a derogatory term, I think, from a Western perspective, but it's not always seen that way in China. It's kind of like the expression "old maid" in English, and the idea there is that if you're not married by the time you're 30, you're out of luck, and this is something that can be very negative if you're a leftover woman. This is not something that is at all desirable in Chinese society. It's not very different in that sense from American culture, where it's perfectly okay for women or men, for that matter, to be unmarried and to remain unmarried. By the way, there's also shongnan, which are leftover men, so that's an expression that's used as well. And the go-betweens, intermediaries that we're talking about here, that you saw in the park, are mostly the parents, sometimes the grandparents, sometimes other relatives. There are also, however, professional marriage brokers, and they also are in the park, and they have a number of clients, and so that you'll see, for example, in these parks, and it's not only Shanghai, Beijing, other places have these kinds of marriage markets as well. You'll see these brokers with a whole host of clients strung up, their statistics strung up on a line with individual pictures, often kind of laminated pieces of paper with information about the person who's seeking a partner and what that person is looking for in a potential partner as well. It's interesting what this phenomenon of marriage market says about modern China. One of the things that it points to is obviously the importance of getting married. China is one of the countries with the highest proportion of married people in the world, and marriage is very important. This is related probably to the one-child policy. If you only have one child, you're concerned about when you're no longer around, having that child all by herself or himself, because in Chinese, from a Chinese perspective, family is much more important than, for example, a circle of friends. So in the United States, well, one wouldn't worry about being left alone. You have your friends, you have your acquaintances, but in China, a family life is really of central importance. The other thing that's kind of interesting about these marriage markets is that the parents are going out and finding a potential partner. Very strange concept, again, from an American perspective, but if you recall that one of the things that we saw was very important in terms of cultural values in China is filial piety, which basically means that you obey your parents and that you go along with what your parents want. And so this is not necessarily something that the children want their parents to do, but they accept those matchmaking activities on the part of their families. Well, one of the other things that it points to, this need for a marriage market, is the fact that in China, typically you work very hard as a student. So you put in long hours studying. School is a very serious thing. You work hard to pass the entrance exam for getting into college, kind of like the SAT, but it's taken much more seriously in China. And once you're accepted as a student in college, you put all your effort into doing well. So there's very little social life associated with high schools, equivalent of high schools or colleges in China. So there's not as much dating that's going on in China, typically in schools and colleges as there is in the United States. So there's less chance to meet a potential partner. The other thing that's different, that has changed in China over the last 10, 20 years, is that you have a lot of women, men as well, who are doing very well professionally, and as a result are a little more particular about a potential marriage partner. So one of the things that you see in those descriptions in the People's Park, in the marriage market, is you see not only a description of the person who's seeking a partner, but also what's important is the qualifications of the person that would be a potential mate. And very often those point to things like wealth and status, having a good job, might even say you need to own your own apartment or even house. So that's one of the difficulties there as well, is that if you're very particular about the kind of person that you're married, that kind of narrows the field significantly. So we're going to talk a little bit more about marriage and about families. And there are a couple of terms there that are introduced in the text that are important. Serial monogamy is what we have in the United States. It's not the same as being a serial murderer. This actually refers to the fact that you get married only with one person at a time. That's not the case, of course, worldwide. There's polygamy in a number of countries, more than probably most Americans would suspect. Now, just because polygamy is legal or is available, it doesn't mean that it's obligatory, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all that widely practiced. For example, in Islam, it's possible to have more than one wife, but it doesn't happen as often as it does in some other polygamous cultures, because in the Quran, one of the things that's emphasized is that if you have multiple wives, you have to treat each of those wives absolutely equitably, and that's kind of difficult to do. There are other terms that are important here when we talk about having more than one spouse. You have polygyny, which refers to having more than one wife, and polyandry, more than one husband, which is not nearly as common as polygyny. The term sororal polygyny doesn't refer to marrying sorority sisters, but refers to marrying actual sisters. Same as to fraternal polyandry, marrying brothers. And those are both fairly common in countries where polygamy is possible. The other thing that's discussed in the text is interracial marriages. This picture shows you the Lovings, and the wife there died not too long ago. This was a landmark case before the Supreme Court in the United States from the state of Virginia. This was an interracial couple, and they were arrested. They were married in D.C. because there was a law against interracial marriages in Virginia. They got married in D.C. and then they moved back to Caroline County and were arrested. In fact, were sentenced to 1 year in prison for living in Virginia as an interracial couple. And it went. That case eventually went to the Supreme Court, and the Virginia law was overturned. This is something that obviously is possible today in all the states. It's not that common. In the textbook, it's mentioned that in 2006 there were 2% of married couples who were represented interracial marriage. That's significantly higher today. In the recent study in the Pew Report, it's over 8%. But there's still a lot of issues with people who elect to marry a person from a different race, particularly blacks and whites together. In studies that have been done, there are more divorces statistically of those couples. They face a lot of obstacles in terms of social pressure from their families, from their friends. At the same time, the studies show that they're more satisfied with the relationship than with couples from the same race. It may be this kind of mentality, it's us against the world and we're going to stick together. This is interesting today in respect to the situation regarding gay marriage, which is evolving and is possible. Gay marriage is possible in a number of states in the U.S., but not everywhere. In fact, there's a law on the books in the United States, a federal law, Protection of Marriage Act, and we'll see what happens with that. It'll be interesting to see the development in that respect. Relational maintenance is another topic that's important. If you found your mate, if you found your friend, you want to maintain that relationship. How do you do that? Well, if we're talking about marriage, there are some things that are obvious, I think, in common sense that have been found that are important. Talking about relationship, self-disclosure, talking about oneself, talking about the relationship. Obviously, it's something that maybe in most cases women find easier to do than men. Being positive about the relationship, showing that you understand your partner, talking through issues that come up, assuring the partner that you're committed to the relationship, sharing work around the house and actually doing the work that you're assigned, your tasks that you're expected to do, and networks, namely making sure that you're on good terms with the circle of friends of your partner and the families as well. Those are all things, obviously, that are important. And for intercultural couples, there are a couple of other things that have been found to be important in sustaining that relationship. One is to openly communicate, particularly about cultural issues that come up, which is inevitable if you have an intercultural marriage, that there are a number of things that are going to come up. For example, in how to raise children, that's very different in different cultures, and there are lots of other possible topics. And what's been found is that it's really important to have open communication to talk about all those issues that come up. Mutual support is obviously very important. There again, you're as in interracial couples in the United States, you're likely to get pressure from friends and from relatives, and you need to be able to support one another. Then you have polygamous marriages, which pose other problems because you have multiple wives, or in some cases multiple husbands. You have jealousy, wives that feel they're not being treated equitably. Some of the things that workarounds for that is marrying sisters. I don't know that that's always going to solve the problem. But this is something that that obviously is something that has to be worked out with individual relationships. One of the other things that these days obviously can play a role in terms of maintaining relationships is electronic communication. There are all kinds of possibilities here, from text messages to being together on communicating through Facebook about what's going on in your relationship. And this varies to the extent that this is important for a relationship, but certainly these days this is more and more important, the social networking that's available. One of the things that interests me is that the extent to which intercultural friendships, relationships can be established through things like gaming. So there are lots of multiplayer online games that have become very popular, and one of the things that's interesting there is that when you play those multiplayer games that you're likely to be playing against people from different countries, and so those games often have a chat capability. And I know that from talking to students and from my own children that sometimes conversations come up between people from different cultures, and it'd be interesting for me to see if studies have been done on whether that ever leads, to what extent that can lead to friendships interculturally. We're going to talk about mate selection a little bit. Interesting topic. This is again something that varies considerably across cultures, and one of the things that's discussed in the text is kind of a interesting aspect of male-female relationships, this desirability enhancement effect. So, for example, for women, if you see a man surrounded by a number of women, that enhances the desirability of that person as a potential mate. And for women, for men, it's exactly the opposite. That if you see a woman surrounded by men, you're less interested in that. I'm not sure why that would be, but that's something that's been found in studies that have been done. We're going to watch a short clip that talks about mate selection and courtship in across cultures.